In the near future, humanity has decided to shed the complexity of clothing and live its life in complete transparency with those around it. We meet Frank, who has just woken up after spending the last 8 years of his life in a coma. Clearly disoriented, the first thing Frank notices is that he is completely naked and there is no one around to take care of him. After a few minutes, he manages to get up and tries to look for a robe to put on in one of the closets in the corner. However, there are no clothes nearby. When he leaves his room, he ends up scaring a cleaning assistant who is also naked. He trips and faints and then wakes up back on the stretcher, but this time he has clothes on, just like the nurse who explains what happened. Frank was shot during a riot 8 years ago and has been in a coma since then. At the moment, he can't speak, but his voice will soon return on its own. He needs to train his vocal cords a little. His parents have also come to welcome him back to the world, and they are all very happy that he is okay. Frank really wants to see Eva, his wife. However, his parents tell him that she is not answering the phone. They assure him that they will bring her soon since the news of Frank's miracle has reached the media. The hospital staff has had to wear clothes to avoid scaring him until he fully recovers in a few minutes. Afterward, the nurse brings him a soy burger because meat is currently a prohibited food. While the doctor tries to explain little by little what has changed in the world in the last 8 years, a janitor appears naked in the window, ruining the gentle treatment they plan to have with Frank, who gets tired of being kept locked up in his room and decides to escape. When he arrives in the hall, he sees that everyone is naked, so he faints again. Back in his room, the doctor explains the law of transparency that requires everyone to be naked all the time. The first thing Frank sees is his parents taking off their clothes in front of him. The trauma of seeing his parents naked is so great that Frank ends up shouting so much that he miraculously regains his voice. The following days are difficult for Frank, who finds out many other things that have changed. Not only does everyone have to go naked, but meat, alcohol, and tobacco are now strictly prohibited. Eva still doesn't respond to his messages, and Frank is starting to think she may have forgotten about him or perhaps doesn't love him anymore. To cheer him up, his parents have paid a large amount of money to bring him some meat and chips, hoping this will help him accept the new reality and become part of the new world. His friends Camel and Lucy have come to visit him and explain a little more about the outside world, trying to make him understand that they are not really bad. Later, the doctor returns to show him what the world was like before the transparency law, when violence and vices took over people, but it brought stability to those problems. However, the man who made all this possible has been missing for 3 days, and the police have no clue about his whereabouts. In the following days, the doctor makes an effort to make Frank see how natural and comfortable it is to be naked all the time. He must avoid having erections in public, as it is a very serious offense. One morning, after his classes, Eva finally appears, making Frank think that the relationship they had 8 years ago is still alive. But it couldn't be further from the truth. She ends her relationship with him and wishes him the best in this new beginning. Now that he knows everything that awaits him in the outside world, Frank is discharged, so he must get used to everything new that surrounds him. Far from there, in the forest, Lucy, a police captain, is called to inform him that a body has been found. The subject is Jan Lan Bing, the man who created the law of transparency. A hero for the whole world, but now he is dead, and as an offense to his legacy, the murderers have dressed him in elegant clothes. We return to 2022, to the moment the transparency law was approved. The world had only 24 hours to adapt to this new way of living, and many chose to buy excess food and lock themselves in their homes for the first few months. Lucy, who has accepted this law with ease, has invited several friends to undress together, making the moment less uncomfortable for everyone. Eva appears, furious with Frank because she discovered that he was unfaithful from the beginning. However, she cannot do anything since he has been in a coma for the last 4 years. What she doesn't know is that the other woman is Lucy, who has loved Frank forever and doesn't have the courage to confess to Eva what he did. At night, it is easy to get drunk enough so that undressing is not such an embarrassing situation. However, there will always be some who resist this new law and decide to fight against it, as is the case with her friend Ramos, who walks away furious when the time to undress arrives the next morning. Lucy attends work completely naked and shows confidence, while the rest of the men cover their parts, unable to contain their desire when seeing their colleagues without clothes. We return to Frank, who has returned to his parents' house since Eva abandoned him. He has decided to go against the rules and started wearing clothes in public. His father begs him to take off his clothes because he is embarrassing them by clinging to the past, and if the police see him, they could arrest him, but Frank is not interested in this. Every time Frank is told that what he does is wrong, he feels even more compelled to repeat the action a few hours later. The news of Lan Bin's death appears on the news, and although his parents show great sadness, Frank seems indifferent. To help Frank feel more comfortable with his nudity, his parents organize a barbecue and invite his friends and the doctor since they were the first people to see him naked in the hospital. Despite all this, Frank still clings to his old t-shirt and the trousers from his teenage years. The next morning, he borrows his mother's car to go for a drive and tries to adjust to the crowds in the city. However, He eventually ends up going to Eva's house to beg her to come back to him, only to discover that she has left him for someone much better, the mayor of the city. Depressed by this turn of events, Frank returns home and retreats to his room, crying like a child. A few days later, he goes to the police station to ask Lucy for details about new technology, something he must learn if he wants to return to service as soon as possible. The artificial intelligence that runs the department informs him that, due to his medical results, he is not fit for risky situations. As a result, he is assigned to office work for the time being, a position where he must listen to complaints from residents who believe that taking out the trash 5 minutes late is a terrorist act. In an attempt to regain his former strength, Frank joins a gym, where he struggles with the discomfort of being around other people in a sweaty, naked environment. Taking advantage of the situation, he asks for his share of drug money, revealing that Frank was not entirely honest as a cop and had corrupt dealings before falling into a coma. A few days later, Frank gets the opportunity to prove his fitness when he captures a criminal who escaped from police custody. Frank goes to the morgue to learn everything they have discovered about Lan Bin's death. There, he demonstrates his skills and notices something the investigators missed. Lan Bin was asphyxiated with a cotton boxer short, indicating that the withdrawns were responsible for the murder. Camel explains that the withdrawns were people who never accepted the transparency law and moved to remote areas of the city, causing the government to strip them of their benefits and forcing them to live as marginalized individuals in the forest. Frank interrupts the conversation by asking for his money once again. Camel tries to evade the topic for a while but eventually confesses that he spent it at the gym. Frank discovers that Camel not only owns the gym where Frank trained, but he also wasted his money. When Frank returns home, his parents inform him that they have arranged a date for him with the neighbor and beg him not to wear clothes, as it will ruin everything. The girl's name is Jessica, and she is much younger than Frank, which pleases him due to her youthful appearance. However, a constant use of her phone disrupts the conversation. During the date, Frank learns about the V, an application that contains all the personal information of each inhabitant of the world. Through the app, Jessica can see even Frank's most intimate secrets, including his medical results and sperm count, completely removing any mystery from meeting someone new. This rushes Jessica's decision to have relations with Frank, but unfortunately, Frank's performance leaves Jessica dissatisfied and disappointed. The next morning, they continue the investigation where they discover that Ramos has something to do with Lan Bin's death since they found his fingerprints on the flat surfaces of the clothes he was wearing that day. It becomes a little bitter when Eva appears and asks for a divorce, something that deeply hurts Frank. He tells her that he still believes in their love, but Eva forces him to put his fingerprint on the tablet, and their divorce becomes effective immediately. After this, they go to Ramos's house where they find him wearing clothes and eating forbidden foods. He has become withdrawn, but for the moment they are only interested in his role in Lan Bin's death, so they take him to be interrogated. Another important aspect is that the doctor believes Frank could become withdrawn due to his longings from the past, so he subjects him to psychological therapy to help him accept the nudity around him. The second part of the process is a therapy session where they try to eliminate his affection for clothes and make him see that it has nothing to do with his essence as a person. This really seems to help him accept his nakedness. Therefore, Frank begins to worry less about being naked and more about having a new beginning. Since he doesn't want to live in his parents' house, he decides to go with Camel, who owes him a lot of money and knows he will not reject him. The only problem is that Camel is now with Lucy, who was his former lover, and this could only bring problems to their coexistence. That same afternoon, an emergency was declared in the mayor's office, which was attacked by withdrawn people who left a death threat on the walls and a lot of clothes thrown everywhere. After placing police surveillance in the mayor's office, they returned to the morgue where the investigators seem to have discovered something interesting in Lan Bin's body. It turns out that he had vasodilators in his blood, something that is only used in nightclubs. However, the nightclubs at the time are very different from what we know today. Here, people dress up instead of doing the opposite, so Frank feels like a fish in water being around many people who are actually dressed, but he can't forget that he is there to investigate Lan Bin's death. Lucy ends up finding a trace of Lan Bin in an area of the club that does not have cameras. Suddenly, her police partner appears, trying to flirt with her, believing that she likes those things. Frank, on the other hand, is living a nightmare when he meets his parents. They are swingers and they go to the clubs to find new partners. The next day, Lucy checks the club's cameras and discovers that 2 people left the place fully dressed, something that only withdrawn people do, so she orders a search of the car's license plates and they reach one of the subjects. After chasing him through several streets, they finally arrest him and take him to be interrogated. It also turns out that he has a clothing store, a clear indication of rebellion in the place. Lucy finds a sweater so soft that she is seduced by the texture and ends up hiding it under her vest in an attempt to take it away, giving indications that perhaps she is not in total agreement with the law of transparency. During the interrogation, the suspect confesses that he meets with some withdrawn people in the forest, a place known as the Mushroom Camp. With this in mind, Lucy and Frank ask the police chief for permission to wear clothes and infiltrate the camp so they will have the element of surprise when arresting them. A few hours later, Lucy is already in the forest. When the time comes to wear clothes, she feels clear nostalgia. After walking for a while through the forest, she is surprised from behind and taken to the mushroom camp where she begs to join their ranks. As a gift, she has brought them clothes that they can wear. With this, she gains the trust of the leaders who do not seem to be bad people, just used to a previous lifestyle. A few moments later, they introduce her to the rest of the group who do not seem to be dangerous people. None of them show interest in violence. They just want to wear clothes and not be exposed all the time. Apart from that, they are very sorry for the death of Lan Bin, who was part of them. To our surprise, Frank is not preparing to help Lucy. In fact, he is having a romantic dinner with his therapist who is blind, which brings him some comfort since she cannot see him naked. Back with Lucy, her affair is about to be discovered when she sees the owner of the nightclub approaching the camp. She surely remembers her from before and will put the entire mission at risk. Because of this, Lucy has no other option than to flee and return to the city, where she tells the commander that Lan Bin was a member of the Withdrawn, something that alters the entire course of the investigation since they were the main suspects. Despite this, the commander does not seem interested in the innocence of the Withdrawn and demands that Lucy give them her location to arrest them all, something she reluctantly accepts since they are not bad people. Following a hunch, Lucy reviews the information that Eva gave them about the attack on the mayor's office, where she discovers something important right after she hears on the police radio that the location of the Withdrawn is false. We see Lucy take off her uniform. And Camel worries that Lucy will end up becoming Withdrawn. She has been wearing the sweater she stole from the store for hours and looks very upset for some reason. Frank, on the other hand, continues to be completely useless for research and has only focused on spending time with his therapist, the one with who he has a secret relationship and who has given him back the trust he needed to regain his sexual performance with Lucy. Frank comes the next morning to inform her that she is temporarily suspended due to the erroneous information she gave about the Withdrawn. So she leaves everything in Frank's hands and reveals to him that the cameras in the mayor's office were altered, something that could only be the head of security or the mayor himself. With this in mind, the protagonist goes directly to Eva's office, who before leaving used to be part of the police security team and knows how to alter the recordings there. She tries to seduce him to distract him, and Frank is about to fall into her clutches. Luckily, a few seconds later, the mayor appears and Frank leaves, promising that he will return with more evidence that same afternoon. The mayor asks to speak with Frank in person, where he confesses to having faked the entire attack on his office. It is election year, and he wants the people to be afraid and feel that they need him. If Frank agrees to look the other way, he will make him chief of police and he will be the mayor's right hand in his affairs. A deal that does not take him 10 seconds to accept. Let us remember that in reality, he has always been corrupt. Lucy, on the other hand, has begun wearing clothes more often that make her feel pretty and safe from stares, something that has obviously brought her problems. So, she ends up being arrested by Pojal and released in exchange for her not saying that she saw him at the club a couple of nights ago. He then informs her that there is a new police chief and they are celebrating, so surely her suspension will be revoked and she will be able to return to work. But when Lucy finds out that Frank is the new captain, she accuses him of corruption and resigns from her job. Right after, she leaves the police station naked once again, only this time she feels exposed and uncomfortable before the eyes of people. That's why she decides to take all her things and flee to the forest, where she meets once again with the mushrooms. Only this time, she will be their leader and will be in charge of moving them forward in the fight to recover their dignity back. Camel is sad due to the departure of Lucy and Frank uses his new influences to get him a position in the police. He needs a partner to combat the mushrooms. The first season ends with a meeting between the mushrooms, who show Lucy the next target, who turns out to be Frank, and after thinking about it for a second, she accepts being the one who will murder him. Don't let the journey end here. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and stay connected for more entertaining content.